recognize
Yeah,
members.
we've been through this before, where hands have gone up pre-meeting. As soon as the gavel drops, I saw Mr. Barrett's hand go up first, then I saw you, and I saw Mr. Fisher. So,
You knew that I
yeah, but the
had
meeting
had-
hadn't started at that point, Ms.
But
Khalid.
you knew, Chair.
I mean, you can contact me at 8 o'clock this morning and tell me that you want the floor, but until that gavel drops and I acknowledge who has the floor, it doesn't work that way. So Mr. Barrett has the floor. Go ahead, Mr. Green. I'm still on Ms. Khalid's point of order. So Mr. Barrett had the floor, as determined by me, when the meeting started and the gavel dropped. So I'm going to continue with that. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
I'd like to challenge your ruling on that, Chair.
Okay, so we've got a challenge of the ruling on the list of the speakers. So it's a dilatory motion. Do we have consensus to challenge who the speaking list is going to be? Okay, we don't. So, Madam Clerk, if you want to take the roll, I would appreciate that. Thank you. So just to be clear, the challenge is who has the floor. And Ms. Khalid, I'm assuming that you're challenging that you had the floor before Mr. Barrett, correct? Yes. Okay. So that's certainly not the way that I saw it, but we will go to the vote. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
So the motion is that Ms. Khalid has the floor. Mr. Baines?
Yes. You said the motion is that she has the floor.
What is the motion?
You said the motion is she has the floor.
Hang on. So the motion is, shall the chair, so the motion is that, that I acknowledge Mr. Barrett at the beginning, and that Ms. Khalid has challenged that, so that,
Why are you arguing if you agree with the clerk?
okay.
That's how we voted.
Hang on a sec, Mr. Barrett. Just give me a second here.
What's that answer?
Just give me a second, please.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order.
No, look it.
Point of order, Chair.
Parm voted for ICRA to have the floor. Why are you arguing? He voted.
So just to recap, when the meeting started, I did identify Mr. Barrett as having his hand raised first and moved to him on the floor. And then I had Ms. Khalid and Mr. Fisher following Mr. Barrett's intervention. Ms. Khalid challenged the ruling of the chair. The difficulty in challenging the ruling of the chair is that the ability of the chair to identify, with the help of the clerk, whose members have their hands raised first is a very subjective matter. So the difficulty as well is in challenging the chair on what is effectively not a rule or a procedure, but a very subjective matter, really forces less discretion for the chair and the clerk to do their job in identifying which members are to speak. So I did identify Mr. Barrett. There is nothing to be challenged in that regard.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Green.
I'll take responsibility for the fact that I'm tuning in here virtually, but I do want to note that I did want to intervene on behalf of Mr. Housefather's point of order. I wasn't given that opportunity. Things rolled pretty quickly and then devolved even faster. So I am hoping that I do have the opportunity to also contribute to Mr. Housefather's point of order.
Right. So I appreciate that, Mr. Green. Just give me a second here, because the problem that we have is that the challenge is that the floor wasn't given to Mr. Barrett, which it was. So I'm not sure, even if we were to move to a challenge of the chair, who would have the floor next, because we could devolve into a situation where we have continuous challenges of the chair on who has the speaking order, and so that's the risk we run here. But I'm prepared to play the game if everybody wants to play this game. Mr. Green, I am going to go to you on your point of order, sir. Go ahead.
I do appreciate that, and I'll say, maybe to back off some of the partisanship, I think given the best of your abilities, you do the best that you can in this committee. I do disagree with you from time to time, but I do not think that you're overly partisan. I would say that on the point of order regarding privilege, I wanted to go on the record on that point of order, which was the order raised by Mr. Housefather before things moved rather quickly, sir. And the reason is because in your ruling, you ruled that this committee was not the adequate committee for you to be able to rule on that point of privilege, that indeed it did have to go to the House. And for that reason, and given the seriousness of both the allegations that were made against Mr. Baines, and given the seriousness of what I consider to be our parliamentary privileges, while I am not in a position to opine on whether or not a line was crossed, I certainly think that it was broached. It was right up against that line. And for that reason, I am in full support of seeing that motion of privilege go to the speaker for consideration. And what I'm not interested in is devolving into a game of shotgun in terms of who sees who's first as it relates to our speakers list. I don't think procedurally that will get us anywhere. And I think that as a committee, we've done the best that we can to move through this. And so, again, we do have, through our standing orders, the ability to participate virtually. I'm doing that here today. I'm glad I am, because I don't want to be caught up in what's happening there. But having said that, procedurally, I feel that I didn't get a chance to contribute to Mr. Housefather's point prior to everything going off the rails. And I would say, just in closing, sir, I won't take up more of your time, that I would not support a challenge on who saw who first, because for the points that you've raised, I think it's a very objective thing. But I would be willing to challenge who should have precedence procedurally in this meeting today as it relates to Mr. Baines. And that's what I wanted to put forward to the members there, and hope that you can take with seriousness the allegations on the point of privilege that Mr. Baines has raised and Mr. Housefather, I think, has rightly provided to you in terms of precedence of order for this particular meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that intervention, Mr. Green, and just for the benefit of the committee, and I appreciate your support on challenging the subjectivity of the chair and the clerk's responsibility to identify those who are deemed to be able to speak. That is one of the difficulties about being a chair, is figuring out there's hands go up and people, I've seen people literally throw their bodies across the table to try to get the attention of the chair. So it is rather difficult. I will say that there are other avenues that members can take through motions to be heard if they choose to, and that's not necessarily challenging the chair. It's actually suggesting that that a particular member be heard. And so we've seen that many, many times in the House, and it's certainly something that can be dealt with at committee as well. So just for the benefit of members on that. So go ahead, Mr. Housefather, please. Is this on a point of order, sir?
It is sort of,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I believe you've made a ruling on the issue of whether or not Mr. Baines should have the floor. And my understanding is that your ruling is no, he shouldn't, that you're allowed to go to either Mr. Barrett or Ms. Khalid or whoever would have the floor. I know I have to challenge that as soon as I can. I believe this is the first time I've had the opportunity, so I want to challenge that ruling, the ruling that you're not going to Mr. Baines on his point of privilege. That would be what I would challenge. Thank you.
In effect, what you're suggesting, and because you had a point of order, you can't move a motion. So the challenge is then to go to Mr. Baines first, based on the fact that we're dealing with a privilege motion. Again, Mr. Housefather, it goes down that pathway where the subjectivity of the selection process of hands needs to stay with the chair. But if that's what you're challenging and you're very clear on that, then I will accept the challenge in this particular case. But again, the responsibility of the chair is to deal with rules, procedure, regulations as they relate to the committee. The subjectivity of such selection of members to speak the chair needs to have that latitude, and the clerk certainly needs to have that latitude. So I'm hearing a little bit more clarity in what you're saying. So I am going to accept that that you are asking that Mr. Baines be heard. Correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm basically saying that on a privilege motion, the floor should first go to Mr. Baines because he had a privilege motion that we should be coming back to.
So that's what you're challenging me on, sir. Okay. And I'm just gonna go to the clerk for a sec, but I see what you're saying. So the clerk just wanted me to restate that, so for clarity of all the members, what we are actually dealing with is that Mr. Housefather is challenging the chair's decision to not go, to allow Mr. Baines to speak first on his question of privilege. Est-ce que tout le monde est clair de
Does everyone understand?
It's a challenge, so it's not subject to debate. So I'm going to allow. Do we have consensus on that? No. Okay. So we're gonna go. Sorry, just hang on. So the clerk is reminding me that the question becomes important then, right? Shall the decision of the chair be sustained in my determination that Mr. Barrett, or are you challenging me then, Mr. Housefather, that Mr. Baines has the floor, that the point of privilege becomes a priority and that Mr. Baines should be given the floor? That's what you're challenging me on, correct?
Yes,
So it's
correct.
not a question of whether my decision is sustained to recognize Mr. Barrett?
No.
It's on this issue. Okay.
It's a question of should Mr. Baines have the floor and challenging your ruling on that.
On the matter of
Based
privilege?
on the matter of privilege,
Okay.
yes.
All right. All right. Are you clear, Madam Clerk?
I'm clear.
Okay.
Clear for everybody?
So we don't have consensus. We're going to go to a vote on this.
All right. So, has everybody heard the terms of the motion? Tout le monde a compris le terme de la motion?
Everyone has understood the terms of the motion?
Twice.
Well, one more time, Chair.
I'll let you explain it.
So the question is to challenge the chair's decision and allow Mr. Baines the opportunity to speak, and that the question of privilege takes priority over any other matters. Am I correct in that, Mr. Housefather?
It is, Mr. Chair, but I think, again, the lack of clarity is, I believe the question is, should the ruling of the chair be sustained? That's the subject of it. But if you don't believe the ruling of the chair is sustained, you're voting no. And if you do sustain the ruling of the chair, you're voting yes. And I think that's where we're confused, because we're meddling other
Okay,
questions.
but my ruling, to be clear, Mr. Housefather, was to give Mr. Barrett the floor, right? So the problem that we have is exactly what I said earlier. We could end up going down a pathway where every time the chair identifies somebody who he or the clerk believes has the floor, that can be challenged.
No, but
So-
Mr. Chair, I'm not challenging. What I think, there's two different things. Whatever the question is, it should be. I understand the question is, shall the ruling of the chair be sustained? And if you don't agree, you vote no. That's, I think, where there's a confusion. What I've challenged is not that you gave the floor to Mr. Barrett. It's that a privilege motion should supersede anything else, and as a result, we had a privilege motion, and the floor should go to Mr. Baines. It's not challenging who you saw or didn't see first.
No, but I think that's what we're voting on. We're voting on the fact that you're challenging the fact that Mr. Baines that my decision to identify Mr. Barrett is not going to occur, and that you believe that the privilege motion should supersede. That I think everybody's clear on that. I think everybody is clear on that. I think we've said it 3 or 4 times that that's what you're challenging my decision on. So, okay, so.
Can we get that in writing?
You want that in writing?
Yes, please.
Okay. We're going to have to suspend in order to do that, Mr. Barrett. Okay. I'm going to, Ms. Khalid, you have a point of order. I'm going to come back to that after we have the request from Mr. Barrett to put that in writing. Okay.
which he is a minister, and he received payments from that company during his time. This, of course, raises questions under the Lobbying Act and the Conflict of Interest Act. With respect to Global Health Imports, this is a company that Minister Randy Boissonnault co-founded. He owns 50% of the company through an Alberta numbered company that he wholly owns. And he offered in his evidence at the last committee meeting that he believed that Stephen Anderson, his partner, is the only other shareholder in that company, that they are, in fact, partners. Global News this past week released text messages that refer to a Randy in the decision to solicit a $500,000 wire transfer, and this is now the subject of court proceedings. There are questions about fraud and wire fraud, and the minister asserted to the committee that at this small company that he co-founded, in spite of the fact that in these text messages there's talk of a partner call and Randy, that it's another Randy, that he is not that Randy at the company. And so it's important. We had the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner here who testified that in spite of having sent a letter previously saying that an investigation wouldn't be pursued, that new concerns, new questions had been raised, and he would examine the matter and then undertake a self-initiated investigation should that need to occur. The Lobbying Commissioner is reviewing the matter, and of course, due to the potential for criminal code violations and Lobbying Act violations, the RCMP will have to review the issue to see if criminal charges need to be pursued. Look, this motion is germane to the work that the committee undertook at the last meeting. I think that we were all surprised by the reports in Global News. I think that having these witnesses come forward to get clarity and provide Canadians with assurances that all of the rules, specifically the ones whose commissioners fall under the purview of this committee, the Lobbying Commissioner and the Ethics Commissioner, with respect to the Lobbying Act and the Conflict of Interest Act and the Conflict of Interest Code for members, that all the rules have been followed, and if rules haven't been followed, then the committee and Canadians would be aware of that, and look forward to the expeditious passing of this motion so that we can get transparency for Canadians. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. On the motion, I've got Ms. Khalid, Mr. Fisher, and then Mr. Cooper. Go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, although this is not what I was expecting to speak on today, but I definitely will. You know, we just experienced in this committee an apology for defaming someone in this committee. And I really appreciated the recognition of that defamation. And I really, I've been on this committee for a couple of years now, Mr. Chair, and I have watched private citizens get hauled in here and be really rammed through the ringer on these issues that are pure speculation, that are based on conjecture, that are based on just, hey, we're going to make an accusation and then we're going to expect that that everyone follow through. It seems like guilty until proven innocent. And what that does, Mr. Chair, is that it puts people at risk. It questions their integrity, and it really does not help how we function as parliamentarians, as ministers in this place. And I think this specific motion is exactly the same. Are we going to drag in private citizens into this committee who have nothing to do with the Conflict of Interest Act, who have nothing to do with the lobbying code, and are going to shame them publicly For what? It is the minister who has a link to the Conflict of Interest Act, and the minister came in here and he spoke quite unequivocally about what he has and has not done, what he is responsible for, what he is not responsible for. And I don't think that we as a committee are in a position to go down that path. It is not helpful to who we are. It is not helpful to our democracy. It is absolutely not helpful to how we conduct ourselves as parliamentarians. I would like to think that we have integrity, but the way that this is being framed, the way that I have been watching constantly, consistently, my colleagues going through the ringer just because, it's not fair. And I do not want to watch private citizens go through that same thing. And I'm not sure why the Conservatives are so determined, Chair, to continue the character assassination and once again drag regular Canadians before committee to attack them and impugn them in order to get more social media clips. It's not helpful. It's not helpful to what we're trying to achieve here. So, if we want to review what actually we heard on Tuesday and some of the reality of the issue, right? I want to talk about the June 4th global news story. Firstly, let's be honest about what we're talking about here with this latest global story. The reality is that the basis of this story is just pure speculation. There is absolutely no evidence that Minister Boissonnault is the person that was mentioned in these texts. And if the minister is unequivocally saying that he is not the person mentioned in these texts, then we should believe them, because God forbid tomorrow, if any one of us are in that same situation, are we going to rely on our colleagues for integrity, to ensure that we are taking care of our democratic process and making sure that we are letting the rules that we have collectively agreed to rule how we govern ourselves as parliamentarians and how we govern ourselves as Canadians? The minister was very, very clear. He said that he is not the person in those texts and in that conversation. And I think that we should believe that. Mr. Anderson, who sent the texts, is quoted in the article on the June 4th global story, saying that the minister is not the person referenced in those texts. The Gowie Group is quoted in the same article, saying that they never had any contact with the minister. And of course they didn't, because the minister had ceased to have any role in the operations of this company a year before any of this happened. Chair, this is really a circular nature with the Conservatives' argument. They incorrectly claimed that the minister was still involved in the company. He explains that he was not, but they expect him to prove that he was not by asking him to provide information about the company that he is no longer involved with. And that reverse onus